This is the Parkinson's Fight Club, a podcast dedicated to empowering and inspiring those living with Parkinson's disease. I'm your host, Jamie Bryson. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode. You guys are going to love this. I was able to get my doctor to agree to come on and spend some time with us, and this discussion is really good. I don't know that there's any discussion like this out there right now that's as specific to kind of the Fight Club ethos, if you will, that we have just in terms of fighting this disease and how to fight it well, and especially if you're a young onset person. So Dr. Savica is a professor of neurology and epidemiology at the Mayo Clinic. He has expertise in both movement disorders and behavioral neurology, and extensive experience as a clinical researcher examining epidemiology studies, risk factors, biomarkers, and environmental agents and associated with neurodegenerative diseases. In his clinical practice, Dr. Savica leads the early onset Parkinson's disease clinic at the Mayo Clinic and is the chair of the task force on early onset Parkinson's disease of the International Movement Disorder Society and section head of the neuroepidemiology at the American Academy of Neurology. So Dr. Savica primarily sees individuals with young onset Parkinson's at the Mayo Clinic, and that's where I saw him. And as you've heard in previous episodes, he's awesome doctor. The Mayo Clinic is an awesome place. So I'm really excited to bring you guys this content, and I hope you really enjoy it. And without further ado, check out this really awesome discussion. I'm so excited to have Dr. Savica with us today on the podcast. Thank you so much for graciously agreeing to be with us today, Dr. Savica. I know you're a busy guy. So
it is my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
I appreciate that. And full disclosure, Dr. Savica is my doctor. HIPAA doesn't have to worry about that because I'm fine with disclosing that. So, but Dr. Savica, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am Rodolfo Savica. I am one of the staff at the Mayo Clinic, Rochester. I'm a neurologist. I specialize in movement disorder and behavioral neurologist. As you all know, Parkinson's disease, for the most part, and especially young/early onset Parkinson's disease. And I have a beautiful wife and a fantastic daughter.
Awesome.
Those are the most important things in life.
Yes, you're a person that has a whole life outside of this work that you do, huh? Well, we really appreciate the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about how you got into being specializing in young onset or early onset Parkinson's.
No, that's a very interesting question because everything started as usual with patient seeing. You see patients, you realize what are the problems, you try to understand the patient, you try to understand their needs. And that was a few years ago when I was seeing a patient, a local patient, somebody that was seen before by other colleagues, and we were talking about his diagnosis that was indeed young onset Parkinson. And after talking a few times, it was appear clear to me, and I was told by them that there was no resources, there was nothing that they could find online or anywhere online, but anywhere, even in an institution like mine that is in the forefront of research and medicine, like the Mayo Clinic, devoted specifically to young onset Parkinson's disease, knowing the challenges that he was facing, that they were facing as a family, that they were facing at work and as career choices and everything else were completely different than what I was seeing and what we know existed in late onset Parkinson patients.
Right.
With all due respect, it's completely different.
Right.
Therefore, I start to dig a lot into that, more into that, and I realized and I noticed it was like one of these eureka moments. Say, oh my God, but for real, there's nothing out there for this important and young group of patients. So I start to getting more into the advocacy. I start to more get into the research, and little by little, in a short term, I identify a number of pitfalls and a number of gaps there were in the field.
Yeah.
And as you know very well, the biggest gaps was how to call that condition, the biggest gap how to define the age of the condition, even in the literature. And I found it bizarre that in 2000 and something, 2000 and, first decade, second decade of 2000s, we were still struggling with not having a clear definition and a clear, a different approach for this group of patients. So everything started with a patient, therefore with one patient, and then this prompt me to be more and more involved and prompt me to study and to switch from the initial target of my research that were mostly based on synucleinopathies, so Parkinson and mentioned Lewy bodies. Mm-hmm. Knowing the difficulties of doing this research, I moved more into still synucleinopathies, but not necessarily synucleinopathies, working mostly on younger individuals. That's basically the story on what prompted me there.
Okay, so you've been doing that for a while, and I know you have some ideas about the differences between young onset Parkinson's and late onset Parkinson's. So what would you say would be the main differences between them that you've realized?
That's a great question. Well, the main difference, forget about the biology, forget about the pathophysiology, forget about the underlying mechanism leading to a disease. The main difference is that a brain of somebody that has young onset Parkinson, early onset Parkinson, does not have stigma of aging.
Right.
It means that is a brain that does not have the accumulation, the damage caused by a number of proteins that we know are getting in our brain as we get older. Mm-hmm. As well, doesn't have the same amount of vascular damage that we all have as humans as we get older.
Yeah.
So it's a brain that is much more, let me pass the term, clean.
Yeah.
As a brain that is less frail. Because clearly, if me and you are 85 and we start to have Parkinson's disease, our brain is an 85-year-old brain to start with. However, we can argue that disease started earlier, but still, the symptoms arise when you're 85. It's different when you're in your 20s and your 30s. We cannot argue, nobody can say that the aging process is already started, because it's not. Because it simply is not. That's the biggest and maybe yet the most relevant differences that we need to be understanding. The other difference, I would say, is that we tend to use the term Parkinson's disease to indicate a group of symptoms and signs characterized and caused by lack of one chemical, which is dopamine, in some specific areas of the brain when there's the largest amount. But we are trying to, in a very simplistic way, to put everything in one bucket. We all know, and everybody that listens to us knows, that, it's very difficult to find two patients with Parkinson's disease that are similar to each other, exactly the same. Everybody's different. Everybody's different because of the life experience, environment, genetic background. Everything counts in this moment. And everything causes the manifestation of disease to be different person to person. Therefore, we still use the term Parkinson's disease, but in reality, we are identifying a number of diseases, a number of mechanisms that are leading to a dysfunction, a damage sometimes, of some group of cells. And we still have to use the word Parkinson's disease because it's easier for reimbursement and everything else. But on the other hand, we are identifying a number of conditions within the name Parkinson's disease. This is incredibly more evident in young onset patients compared to late onset patients with Parkinson. So this is another big difference that we see between young and old, or early and late.
Yeah. So, in terms of treatment, of the difference between how you may treat a person with late onset and young onset, what would you say the differences are there?
Well, typically, historically, classically, what we have studied, what we were teaching the younger generation of physicians and neurologists and so forth, we were always incredibly careful to start medications on younger individuals. We wanted to say, oh, we have to make sure that you don't have complication of the treatment or complication of the disease.
Right.
I'm referring to the dyskinesias, I'm referring to the fluctuation of response and so forth. And that was something right to say, maybe 20, 30 years ago, when we didn't know very much about things. But now the data are not supporting this particular idea. Late onset patient, usually when we see the typical findings, clinical findings of Parkinson's disease, tremor, rigidity, stiffness, falls, and so forth, we can easily doing a trial, and everybody doing a trial with the medication, the levodopa, the Cinemet, right away, and see how you respond. If you respond well, if you take the medication 1 hour before meals, done correctly, you respond well, the right dose, people are going to be responding, doing fine. In young onset patients, historically, again, as mentioned before, we didn't want to do that because there was the concern of the fluctuations. And that was wrong, because the data do not support that. The data support that people with early onset Parkinson's disease, young onset Parkinson's disease, may have dyskinesia, slightly more than what late onset patients have, but slightly more, not that much more. And also there are some genetic mutations that put some patients with young onset Parkinson at a higher risk of dyskinesia. And these seem to be the driver of what was observed in the past. But now we know about this mutation. We know that clearly in this group of patients we should not be that aggressive. But otherwise, if some of my patients come to me unable to move, stiff, mentally, physically slow, I need to make sure that they take the right amount of meds. And it doesn't matter to me what would happen in the future. Not because it doesn't matter, because I know that likely I will be able to control the future somehow, making adjustments. Also, we are not talking about with somebody 85 or 75 when you don't have, you're not working or you're retired and you can take naps through the day and so forth. You don't. I usually use the analogy, and I know I did it to you as well, like diabetes, right? In diabetes type 1, I had to give insulin. And we know there is a threshold of the insulin that works for you. But we know that if there are some days, maybe you're working out too much or too little, or maybe whatever are your requirements, then you need an extra amount of insulin.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we had to do in young onset Parkinson. That's different than what we do in late onset Parkinson. It's not written anywhere that you have to take the same amount of medication every day. Usually you find the threshold that works for you, whatever it is. It can be 1 tablet, it can be 3 tablets, it can be 1 tablet 5 times per day or 3 tablets once a day. That's something that you have to work with your physician to find the right one. Once we know this is the threshold that works for you, let's say you have a wedding or you have a particular demanding day, or as in your case, you're training for a very demanding physical task, then you need to take more medication.
Yeah.
That's an important thing, and that's something that we don't do as much in late onset Parkinson because we don't have this kind of request and requirement from the body.
Yeah, I mean, it surprises me how many people I come across through, getting to know them online, or even some people I know who I've met in person who their doctor is not giving them very much levodopa because they're afraid to give them too much. And so their quality of life is not that great. And it's like, I had one guy who actually ended up coming to see you, who was like, he lost his job and, he had a tremor going really bad. He's like, how am I going to interview for a job like this? And I was like, this is crazy. Like, you're not being treated, So do you think that the main reason why people are not treated adequately is just because of this stigma that exists from a long time ago, or?
Well, it's because of the stigma, it's because of the data that were existed some time ago, and the opinion of the leader of the field of some time ago that we have to change, we are changing, are gone, are changed. But if I change an opinion today in whatever field of science or field of society, it will take time to make a change in the mentality of my colleagues and in the young physicians. So what we do today, we would be able to see an effect in a few years. Yet we are facing a situation when our patients are seeing colleagues that are very clever, very well educated. So I'm not blaming on anybody, but I'm just saying that that's a different way we were thinking about this condition. That the current data. So remember, and you know that everything I say is supported by data. I don't base that on personal opinion. I base that on data that support what I say.
Yes.
The current data are not supporting that we need to be saving the levodopa for later. We don't need to be saving our good times for later, because there is no data support. We are not saving anything. Things are gonna progress, and again, in a different way for anybody. For anybody's different, so it's not the same for anybody.
Right.
But I need to help you now, not in the now. So in today, in tomorrow morning, not necessarily in 10 years, because in 10 years I don't know what would happen to any of us.
Right. Exactly. And the other thing that I love about what you just said is that maybe I hope that the patients hear that you don't have to tolerate off times. Right? Like I come across so many people who just complain and they say, oh man, I have off times and it's so terrible. And I'm like, just take more medication.
Or adjust the time. You know what I mean? Like, it means that if there's off times, it means the medication is working, first of all, because you have an on time, so it's working.
Yes.
Even if you had dyskinesia, it means the medication is working, right? Too much. Mm-hmm. But if you have on and off time, means that it has to be adjusted, and to make sure that the off times are limited to nothing, to zero if possible, or to not enough to bother. And don't get me wrong, the challenge that is posed by young onset patient is also that sometimes if the disease is different, there's no aging, the mechanism are multiple, sometimes the response that you receive and you're expecting and you observe in the patient is not what you're expecting. Mm-hmm. And therefore you have to be creative at times, in the sense that you have to understand the biology behind that to try to modify the way the medication and the medications sometimes are used without having the same kind of medication or kind of cocktail of drugs that you would use in late onset patients. So that's an important thing. That sometimes to minimize off times we have to go to a different route. Things that we were not going in late onset patients.
And I'll say, from the patient side of it, it's hard. It's work. It's trial and error. And, you've been awesome to work with. I hope everybody has a doctor that's easy to work with. But, I say to you, hey, my medication's wearing off every day at a certain time. And what can we do different? And we sort of experiment. And, sometimes the experiment's really hard and it doesn't work out well. And sometimes it works out well. So if you're willing to put in the work, and you have a good partner with your doctor, then I think you can really have a pretty reasonable existence for most of the time.
Agree, and you have to really partner and you have to work together. As you say very well, you're accepting the fact that it's not an exact science yet.
Right.
In the future, it will be a little bit different. In the future, if I think about my medical school, when I was in medical school in the 90s, and the idea of diabetes, again, use diabetes because it's a very common disease.
Yeah.
You had to dose insulin according to what you were best guessing what was going on. Nowadays, you have a sensor that tells you how much you need.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So with dopamine, we cannot do the same yet. And there's the fanny pack with the pump and whatever.
Right.
But that was what happened to diabetes was not that long ago. So I'm thinking something similar, a way to tell objectively how much dopamine you need and how to best transport it to the brain. That's another aspect.
Yeah.
It's something that can happen, that should happen, and I think it will happen in our lifetime. Not necessarily in a relatively short time.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, because I feel like a lot of it's just guessing, right? Like I have the baseline medication that that we do, and then every now and then, for whatever reason, I have a day where it's just I need
work.
need a little bit more, and so it would be really cool to have an objective level of some sort.
And the fact that it doesn't work can be for 2 million reasons. I mean, it can be because you're off with food. Also, the food is having a major aspect,
Yes.
major part. And when I say food, I really mean food, not just protein. Protein is a very reductionistic approach. There's beyond protein. It has to do with absorption, food intake, amino acid transportation. We have so many variables that we need to be considering every single time you are taking the medication. But that's an important thing. That I hope that in the future, and it's not, I say I hope because it's the best way, but in the future, I am pretty sure we will have something very much similar to what we have in diabetes, because it makes sense. It tells you, hey, your dopamine level are down. Take, I don't know, a quarter more of the injectable, I'm just saying, injectable medication or the inhaler or the pill. Depends on the way you absorb it and when in the day you're absorbing. That's an important point.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit just now on food. I want to go ahead and ask you, is there a particular diet that you think works better for people with Parkinson's, or is it still
as a whole? This is a great point. You hear a lot these days about gluten-free, vegan, paleo, even intermittent fasting. Everything is different. And I would say, as a whole, for the entire Parkinson population, I would say no. Having a balanced diet is great. In some circumstances, when we have more information about the molecular changes that are occurring within the body of somebody with Parkinson's disease, intermittent fasting can be very helpful. But that is done with the purpose of trying to improve the autophagic response of the mitochondria.
Yes.
That in certain early onset patient, young onset patient, we know we have a signature. Therefore, it's good to trigger. In others, there is no sense. Makes no sense to go there. So, as usual, the entire concept of diet, also supplements, has to be doing with try to individualize the treatment. And that's
awesome.
crucial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would say a balanced diet, a more Mediterranean diet is a good one. However, I'm Italian, as you know. And in Italy, in my country, we have Parkinson's disease, we have dementia. So it's not just the diet.
Yeah.
Not. Otherwise, countries like Italy, Egypt, Lebanon, Spain, everybody would live 200 and having no problems. And it's not working this way, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So another thing, exercise. We talk a lot about that, and we know that exercise is really important. What would you say is the best type of exercise, and how, is there a difference between the different types of exercise? What is your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So that's a fantastic question. So if you tell me, Rodolfo, what is the single most effective treatment to delay the progression of degeneration?
Okay.
I'm not talking about Parkinson. I'm talking Parkinson and also dementia. ALS is different. It's a different story. So let's not confuse ALS. But Parkinson and dementia, we say, yeah, sure, physical exercise, 30 minutes, 5 times per week of aerobic exercise is the best treatment to try to delay the progression of disease because it improves the cardiovascular health, reduces cardiovascular risk, has a direct effect on the brain and on the neurons. So, and this is based upon number of animal models and human studies. So, but on the other hand, but they think that one of the important things is that you have to like what you do.
Yes.
So if you don't like if I tell you, yeah, Mr. Bryson, why don't you start to, I don't know, to ski? You say, but I don't like, I'm just saying, maybe you like to ski, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I say, ski is good for you. I say, but I don't like that.
Yeah,
it's very hard for me to ski. So it's very important that we are having our patients, everybody doing what they like. It can be running. It can be playing soccer. It can be, I'm also a strong proponent of exercises that improve your core. So kickboxing, boxing, martial arts, grappling, jiu-jitsu, especially judo, those are good because they also have another benefit in the long run. They teach people how to fall. They teach people how to break fall.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
When we get older, when you're going to be 70, you can sleep on ice, especially if you live in Minnesota, and you can break a bone and you're dead, basically, okay?
Right.
So, I broke fall a few times on ice when I was walking on ice because it's a common thing that happens. But I would say, first of all, things people like. Second, everything that is aerobic, make people perspire, and work on the core. Why the core of the body? Because allows the perispinal muscles, the muscles that are around the trunk, to be always active. And we need them. We need that to improve our posture. We need them to avoid bad contraction of the back. We need them to reduce the risk of future falling and improve overall our health because they are difficult to train. This is to me the one people should do. But if you say, like my wife, I like to golf, say go and golf. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
and maybe walk instead of ride the cart.
Correct. Very good. Rather than going to the cart, jog or walk. But that's an important thing. Another interesting issue. What about weightlifting? Am I against that? Not at all, unless it's lighting. But clearly, as you know, maximal weightlifting with large, heavy weights is making us more stiff.
Okay.
Makes our muscle more stiff. That's not necessarily the best treatment that I'm expecting to see. If you do some weightlifting together with everything else, that's a different story. Then it's becoming a balance, a very, very balanced exercise. But it's something that we need to implement as a society, not necessarily in Parkinson in general, I would say.
Yeah, so that's really cool what you said about the core strength thing, because I've told people also, I think it's important to be strong because, if you have Parkinson's and you're weak, then that's obviously going to make the situation worse, because if you're stronger in your core muscles, maybe that even helps you not fall. Maybe that helps you have the strength to catch yourself and that kind of thing.
Dr. Mr. Bryson, but as a triathlete, as an Ironman competitor, as a mountain biker, how important is for you? Forget about Parkinson. I'm just talking about purely as an athlete. How is it important to have a strong core muscles in order for you to succeed in what you do?
It's super important, especially for mountain biking, because you're just you have to make your body go where you want it to go, and if you don't have the strength to do that, then you're going to crash. you're going to hit a tree.
Absolutely.
And actually, that's one of the things that I have to be careful about too. Just like anybody else, is if when you get fatigued and tired, that's when you become more susceptible to falling and just not and making mistakes and things like that. So yeah, core strength is super important for those
again,
things.
beyond Parkinson, but especially in Parkinson, I would say.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of people that I've heard say that kind of getting the heart rate up above let's say 75% of max, or somewhere for above 50% max, is better than just kind of like an easy walk. What would you say to that?
Well, for sure, walking is good. But
Okay.
no, we are talking about doing
Sweating.
more than walk, sweating, perspiring. And sometimes it's not easy to perspire, because if let's say, if you start to run, for the first 20 minutes, you will not drop because you're used to, because you're used to run and you used to train. So it's not that easy sometimes to elevate yourself at that level. But clearly, running is not enough. Running is a good start, but not enough. We need to really try to increase our heart rate to a point that you start to, I will not say feel the fatigue, but clearly
You're working hard.
You're working out. You're not like there just for the ride. But the ride will be good, but it's not at all.
Yeah, this is good. I think a lot of people who, one of the things I thought about when you were talking is, I know some people who like to do certain exercises, but they've kind of gotten away from it as they've gotten further into their Parkinson's journey because they're scared, and running is a good example of that. And it's like, I know people who have stopped running because they feared falling. What would you say to somebody who says, well, I love to run, but what if I fall? What would you say to somebody like that?
You can fall regardless. Let's start with that.
That's a good point.
One thing is an interesting observation that many patients maybe are listening can see. There's the largest group of young patients is reporting that when they run, they're fine. When they run, they're feeling fine. Mm-hmm. And if you have, for example, tremor or a reduction on the arm swing when you walk, so you swing less when you walk, maybe your spouse can, or your significant other, or your friend can see that when you run, this reduction is in most of the case is reduced. So people would say, I feel fine when I run. And clearly I don't feel I can run for that long, but when I run, I feel fine. So clearly there is always a fear of falling, but there is also a fear of breaking a bone or whatever. We live in fears. This is what we are. We are humans. But I would not have if I like what I do, and I like to run, for example, you can jog maybe initially in a much more limited and rather safer environment. I don't know, in the circuit of a gym, where if you fall, you don't have too many obstacles next to you, or maybe on a treadmill.
Yeah.
And then once you have the stamina, once you feel more secure, then you can run out, reducing run outside, reducing the risk of falling. But on the other hand, you may fall regardless. And then, as you say very well, that's a very important point. If you're tired, fatigued, this is when mistakes occur. Mm-hmm. If you're running short on meds, this is where the mistakes occur. This is where the problems start. It's very unlikely that you hear, and I want to have your experience on that, oh my God, I am falling, but I'm on. Very unlikely.
That's true. I don't have balance issues at this point, but I can feel when I get weak, especially when I'm mountain biking, that I can't move my bike or move my body where it needs to go as easily, and that's just a recipe. You got to slow down.
You got to slow down.
That's what you got to do.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to listen to your body every day, especially if you have a condition that is impacting your body.
Right.
But you have to listen to this very carefully.
Yes.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. So there's a couple other things I want to ask you just kind of briefly, if you have any opinion on these.
Sure.
So what do you think about saunas? And do you think someone being in a sauna regularly is good? And what do you think about cold water immersion therapy?
Okay. So very good. So sauna, regularly if you go to a sauna, is good, especially in some countries, northern US, or Minnesota, where I'm from, or even in some northern European country, sauna is part of the cultural aspect. But clearly, everything has to be done in moderation. If you spend 2 hours in a sauna, it's not going to be good for you, as anything. The only problem with sauna we have is one, that you have to be careful, especially if you're taking medications such as, for example, carbidopa, levodopa, or levodopa in general. You might have lower blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So spending a lot of time in a sauna alone is never a good idea.
Okay.
Never be in a sauna alone, first of all. That's a rule of thumb that is beyond Parkinson. But especially if you have Parkinson, I would try to make sure that you don't feel completely dehydrated, completely hypotense, because you're sweating, perspiring too much. That can be a problem. And if that can be my only concern. That's why I recommend people not to do sauna alone, because if you feel you have a syncope, you're falling down and you're on the ground there and nobody's around you,
that's not good.
You likely will die. that's the point. But that would be my only concern. But then nothing against that. Again, as long as it's done in moderation.
Okay.
If you spending 2-3 hours is not good. Likewise, now it's interesting. There is this huge debate that has been ongoing forever in medicine between if you had, let's say, a muscle sprain, you have to put warm or ice. Nobody knows. Trust me, nobody knows. But ice baths are very good for regenerating, for athletes especially, to regenerate the muscles, to get a thermic shock that allows to have a faster recovery after a workout. If you do this for a workout recovery, I think I have no problems at all. But remember something, some patients, not everyone with Parkinson's disease, they also may be more sensitive to changes in temperature because there's a damage in the little nerves that are responsible for thermosensitivity. So having a huge thermic shock can be sometimes more problematic in this group of patients. But again, now and then, as part of the recovery from, let's say, an Ironman competition, makes sense. If you do it every day, I'm not sure whether it will be having any benefits.
Okay, fair enough. So I had, I guess, some questions that the group, the Parkinson's Fight Club group, wanted to ask you if we could have a couple minutes to see if I could answer a couple of those questions.
Please, absolutely, I'm happy to.
Some of this we already covered. So one person wants to know about taking extra doses of levodopa during exercise, and how do you know what intervals to do that in? And because he asked his movement disorder specialist about this, and they didn't know anything about it. So what would you say? How can someone figure that out?
It depends on the exercise. Let's say that the best way to do it is more or less what you did. Is that the first time, and you take the medication, you exercise, and see when you start to feel off balance or with some stiffness. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you do a marathon. For the first 15 miles, you're fine.
Yeah.
But then you start not to feel good. That is the time I will figure out the interval when you start not to feel good and anticipate that.
No, so you figure it out when you're training.
You have to train it. You will never know otherwise. You have to train it, and you have to train it a few times, because it's not, maybe one day you had a very good day, and those are the great days that everybody wants to have whenever you're training for anything, but those are not the days that count. They count are the bad days. The one then everything, let's talk about marathon or running, the legs are not moving, you feel stiff, you don't feel good. Those are the days that counts, those that then make a difference in training. But those are the days that you have to use sometimes to understand when to take the medication. Usually, let's say, again, use an example of marathon because it's intuitive. 15 miles, I start to feel off. I will take it consistently. I will take it around 12 miles. So I prevent this crash. And I will see again when it's happening.
So take it before you need it.
Something that we will never, neither I or anybody would know that, because it's something that you have to train yourself.
And I'll just say, in terms of my own experience, that I take my normal baseline medication when I'm supposed to take it, even if I'm racing. But I'll choose some Cinemet tablets at various intervals, just when I think it's. I anticipate you have to anticipate that crash, like you said, because if you run out of, if you're off, it's already too late, right?
It's
Like
too late.
you have
If
to,
your off is too late, it will
yeah,
take 20, 30, 40 minutes to
for sure.
go back up. So that's the difficult part. Anticipation is key in this case, but you have to train it. So you will never have, surprise, you will never go and say, okay, take my medication and go to the Ironman. No, you train it before, knowing when, more, and what are you feeling? Because you know better than me.
Yeah, it's
Everybody
true.
knows better than your physician. I know, and patient tells me that, so that's why I know. I know when it is about to come. It can
Yeah.
be a feeling that is difficult to report to your
Yes.
physician, but you
Yes.
know when it's the time. And I'm not talking about massive changes like dystonia, dyskinesia. No, 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 no. I'm talking. It's a feeling. It's a feeling that patients know, and you can tell me that if I'm wrong on that.
No, 100%. And it takes time because you don't even know your own body that well, and you have to spend a lot of time paying really close attention to it. And it's
Absolutely,
just it becomes part of the training, I guess, kind of like
absolutely.
nutrition. So awesome. Another question was, this person wanted to know about any new clinical trials or new therapies that are kind of
Very good.
coming down the pike.
Excellent. This is a fantastic question. Questions. I love that. The entire goal is to do a step back a moment. So far there have been hundreds of trials failing on Parkinson's disease. Even the similar approach that has been used in Alzheimer's disease with the infusion of monoclonal antibodies that now has been approved by the FDA for Alzheimer has been tested in Parkinson and has been negative. So we have a history of failure. And where we have two options. Either we continue to hit our head, bang our head on the wall, failing, 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 or we try to say, okay, why are we failing? The reason why we have been failing so far, is that we are doing a very rookie mistake to me. The rookie mistake is we are talking about Parkinson. It's like saying I'm talking about cancer, breast cancer. That is not the way you should treat the condition. If you ask me, do we have trials? Yes, we have. We will have trials, especially targeted in patients that have specific mutations, genetic mutations, or biochemical abnormalities. Means that we have to do an effort to understand the subtypes of the disease. Once we have the subtypes of disease, then we can target the people that carry some specific molecular and clinical subtypes. And it's happening right now. So we have a couple of trials coming that are going to be specifically in some patients, not in everyone, but in patients that have some specific characteristics. Guys, it's like breast cancer for real in women. Somebody has a breast cancer with mammogram. I take a piece of cancer, I look under the microscope, I know anything about this cancer. I know what treatment works, what treatment doesn't work, and what to expect. We cannot take piece of brains of our patients. It's been tried in the past. Trust me, it didn't really work very well, but not for the wrong reason. You think because it was damaging? No, no. It was always negative because you have to pick up the part of the brain that has the dysfunction. It's not always clear what you pick.
Yeah.
But we have surrogate markers that can tell us what's going on and can tell us the subtype, the biochemical, so at the biochemical cellular level what's going on, and then we can target that. There are a few opportunities in the upcoming months and that are occurring now, again, in patients that have some specific characteristics that are very precise. If you tell me, do you have new development, new drugs for whole Parkinson? It's not working this way. It's
Okay.
no, it's like cancer. It's like, again, think about it, lung cancer. If I say to somebody, you have lung cancer, what does it mean? Well, you're a cancer survivor as well, so you know what does it mean? Like nothing. I want to know the subtype. I want to know what to expect, and this is exactly what we have to do with Parkinson's disease.
That makes sense.
And another thing I want to tell, and I know it's not the topic, but it's related to the topic. We have to do a huge effort here also. Again, look at the failures, look at what happens in the future, to differentiate, to make sure that we understand the subtypes, and we start with macro differentiation. Late onset, early onset, old, quote, quote, young, men, women.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an important difference that is being constantly overlooked. Women and men are biologically different, and that's not to do too much with the hormones. However, we have to talk about hormones there, but it's to do with the chromosomes, or with the presence of chromosome X. That is the most important chromosome that we have. Without chromosome X, we cannot live. We have one, women have two.
Yeah.
And hormones are having a very important relevance secondary to the presence of chromosome X. If you ask me, what about testosterone? I have no idea. Means that we don't have enough knowledge about testosterone yet for Parkinson. What about the role of estrogen and progesterones, the cyclical role that happens in women, the menopausal role, and the perimenopausal role? We have very little knowledge. We have to acquire knowledge to the point that I think that we should have a separated, but not segregated, separated approach between men and women. Wow. Because it's completely different, even for trial, even for research. Because that, and even for advocates and advocacy, the problems are different. You cannot get pregnant, I think. No. I think, right?
No, you're
women
right.
Can, and that can, set a easy, but rather difficult situation that we don't have too much knowledge about it. We are growing knowledge of that, but we don't have too much knowledge about it. And those are major differences that we need to use, to think, and to adopt in research. Because what will work for you, let's say if I'll give you a drug tomorrow that stops the disease, it may not work to the patient next door, it may not work to somebody with your same characteristics, but being a woman. It may not, because we're different biological systems.
Right.
So that's an important point to make.
That's awesome. It's good to hear. So it's actually time for me to take my medicine.
Go ahead. Please. You should never stop doing that. That you should always take it. You know me. Please go ahead and take it no matter what.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, I've taken enough of your time for today, but this has been great. And I can't thank you enough for coming on, and appreciate your time.
No, I would like to thank you to invite me, and I would like to thank you and everybody involved in this community, which is a very special community, especially in a good way. People that have a lot of advocacy, people that are trying to spearhead the field and the society, removing social stigma, and trying to help me and others understanding what's going on. Because to me, it's a learning experience every day. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, not often, but sometimes I'm wrong in things that I do, which is fine. Everybody's wrong. But on the other hand, we have to be thinking things in a different way. And I think, let me say one thing though, it is crucial that we are coming together, patients, expert, alleged expert on the field, legislators, to try to have people understand that we are not dealing with the same disease that happens in our great grandfather or grandfather, and we have to understand another thing that I don't want to be, bringing bad news, but the Parkinson's disease is on the rise in terms of frequency in the population, and we have to understand why. It's not simple. It's all over the world, so just not in some areas. So clearly, it's something that we need to face as a society, and we need to be coming together and trying to promote and give some particular ability to come up with fundings, come up with research, come up with initiatives devoted solely to young, early men, women, doesn't matter, but by specific groups within the big community, because that can help very quickly advance in science and ultimately help the patients.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of all of the young onset people I know and the Fight Club group that we're here to help in any way we can. So,
That's very good.
let me know. Let me know if there's anything I can do or anything I can help you in terms of that. But I love that you said that we all need to come together as patients,
100%.
as physicians, researchers, and the politicians as well. So that's great.
100%.
Yeah. So, and we need to bring more awareness to it for sure. So, I hope that we're doing that.
Indeed.
So I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Anytime. It's a pleasure for real. And I would like to thank everyone that spent some time listening to us.
Awesome.